Hello, this is Anna Laura Brown, host of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where we talk about how to actually thrive and heal your autoimmune condition rather than just covering it up with pills or changing your diet and hoping you'll feel better one day. We feature solo episodes on helpful topics and interviews with guests who have actually walked in your shoes with autoimmune disorders and or who have years of experience in helping people to thrive and not just survive with autoimmune challenges. I'm a health coach who started this podcast because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2018 and wanted to inspire hope and transform health for people with autoimmune challenges. So keep listening and let's get you the help and hope you really need. This is the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast. And today I am happy to welcome Holly Bertone to the podcast. And Holly has a pretty interesting and colored background, if you will. She comes to us as having healed from autoimmunity, but also cancer and working with the FBI and all kinds of other interesting things. So, Holly, why don't you go on ahead and introduce yourself to us?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Anna Laura. I really appreciate being here. And I love this podcast. I love being able to give hope to those in the autoimmune community. I suffered for 12 years and I suffered for 6 of them before I even realized that there was hope. So I'm so glad that you have this show. And yeah, so Holly Bertone, former FBI chief of staff for counterintelligence, turned holistic health coach for midlife women to help them in the throes of the challenges with all the stuff that we're dealing with between the burnout and the weight gain and the energy loss and sleep. And I do have quite a few individuals with autoimmune disease in my community. Also work with women from a preventative aspect so that those diseases don't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a lot that you can do to prevent the autoimmunity, especially once you know what some of those common triggers are. And I think a lot of us are just not educated. I know I wasn't. And so when I got hit with my autoimmune diagnosis, it just kind of jolted me and took me by surprise. Was like, what? But then now that I look back on it, I can see that I definitely had a lot of those triggers. A lot of those things were festering, if you will, for years before. And I probably went 4 to 5 years before I got my diagnosis too. That's just kind of
Yeah.
unfortunately the common state of our healthcare system or sick care system, if you want to call it that, that just
I caught our sick care system, so we're on the same page.
yeah, absolutely for sure. So yeah, given everything that you've dealt with, why don't you start off by sharing with us a little bit then about you've had, you've been knocked down, you've got back up, and you've had, several different comebacks, if you want to use that terminology. So first of all, what would you say is a comeback story, and how does somebody know if they need a comeback?
Oh my goodness. I'm glad you asked that question because I think so often we think of a comeback like some big event or some big adversity, and especially dealing with, autoimmune disease. But autoimmune disease, like, is the gift that just keeps giving every single day. You wake up, you're like, whoa, what hit just hit me today? And I think that's kind of like life too. We go along and we do the things, and then all of a sudden, this adversity, and we're running late in a fight with our spouse or our partner, and we've got all of this stuff that adds up over the days, the weeks, the months, and the years. And what happens is that, we chase the stuff, the career and, the partner and the kids and the house. And we chase all of this stuff and we become so disconnected from ourselves, and then throw an autoimmune disease in the mix and we're juggling everything. And we don't like our bodies, our minds, we just can't handle it. And we get to a point where like this is just too much to come completely disconnected from ourselves. The disease happens, and all of the other health challenges to boot. So really that comeback story is creating a comeback so that you can come back home to yourself and not be so disconnected, scattered, and running on empty.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that terminology because I think you don't have to have an autoimmune disorder to suffer from or need a comeback. I mean, you could have all kinds of other health challenges. Like we mentioned a little bit in the intro that you've had a cancer experience as well. But I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that as well. But, just a lot of different things and not even just health related, just life knocks a lot of us down and we all end up having to bounce back or come back at some point because otherwise, if you don't do that, you're going to just continue to be dragged down and be negative and not live a healthy and thriving life without that comeback. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so with the cancer, I actually like to start before I was diagnosed because it really, the contrast creates the clarity to help set that stage. And I was, like I said, I was the chief of staff for the FBI. So I had this super successful career, high stress management position. And then I was also an Xterra triathlete and competitive mountain bike racer. So I was very fit, what I thought was the epitome of health, because I weighed 110 pounds and I'd stand on a podium and get a medal around my neck. And I thought that was healthy. And here, what I realized, there's a lot of factors that go into health that does not include the two numbers between the numbers between your two toes. And what happened was, I'm in the middle of just thinking I'm on top of the world. And on my 39th birthday, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and went through the surgery, chemo, radiation. 1 year later, because I had not healed from cancer, I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And I just kept pushing for tests, thinking something was wrong or the cancer was back or something like that. And here they're like, oh, well, you've got an autoimmune disease. And they're like, you've got Hashimoto's. I'm like, Hashi what? And the doctor gave me some, thyroid medicine and, scooted me out of the office. And I get home and I'm like, wait, what just happened? And, and I'm not comparing or contrasting the two because we all have our different journey. For me, cancer was start stop. I was diagnosed, I went through my treatment, and treatment ended. For autoimmune disease, this was basically what I find out, years and years and years later, my body was already at chronic inflammation, disease state. We added chemotherapy on a body that was not draining anything. So I have no drainage pathways that are open. My body is full of chronic inflammation. The autoimmune disease pops up. And then after that, it was years of debilitating chronic fatigue that was so bad that in 2017, I was bedridden and I was forced to resign from my dream job. And that year was, I was in victim mode. And I just thought that this is how life was supposed to be. I thought that, and especially my breast cancer doctor was like, well, lightning hit, and I thought, oh, well, this is just some kind of random occurrence, not understanding how disease happens in the body. And so I thought, well, if this is random, then this is just how life is supposed to be. So I marinated in my own misery. I marinated in my own victimhood for quite a long time. And then one day in 2018, I woke up and I'm like, okay, I am ready to take responsibility for my health and my life. And I had no clue what that was. Functional medicine was, I don't know if necessarily it was new, but it just wasn't as popular as it is today. I had already gotten my health coach certification because I was already like, okay, I want to, try to get better, but going gluten free and dairy free and cleaning up my environmental toxins moved the needle just a little bit, but hardly anything else. So I was just stuck and I didn't know what to do. So I went on my own path because I was like, okay, the doctors are failing me. I learned a lot as a health coach, but that kind of didn't, move the needle either. So I was on a mission to figure out how to heal myself. And that's what I did. And then I just started, working with women, both in the chronic illness community, but now more so from the preventative aspect, because I was like, we can stop this. We can stop this before it happens. We have agency over our health. And the big diseases, the autoimmune, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease, probably like 90-95% they happen because of that increased chronic inflammation in our bodies due to a lot of our everyday choices. There is some aspect of genetics, there is some aspect of the randomness of life, but a lot of it's our lifestyle factors, and we have control over that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned, you gave up the gluten, you gave up the dairy, you tried a little bit of removing the toxins. That started moving the needle a little bit, then not so much. What would you say was the one thing that really started moving the needle for you?
Yeah, that was really when I started to get into the emotional aspect, which not a lot of people talk about. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score, which is an amazing book, but we hold our emotions in our body, but not just that. Our brains want to keep us in homeostasis. So, and especially like, cancer, autoimmune disease, and you have this label, you have this disease. So our brain wants to go to court. Our brain wants to defend having this disease. We have a disease, we have a label, the doctor gives you this label, right? And your body now, your brain, your body wants to defend that. It will go to court and it will defend it to the bone. So, we can either argue for our limitations or we can argue for what's possible and we can argue for that healthy life. And that's what it was that I was just in this loop. And it's a lot more than, I mean, it's, a lot more than just like mindset and, oh, just stay positive. I mean, it's a whole, science behind it. But being able to realize like I need to break this cycle. And that's what I had to figure out how to do, is how to break that cycle and start arguing for becoming my future self, who is healthy, who is vibrant, who has abundant energy, versus arguing for all of my limitations and being bedridden.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And this is the same kind of thing that I hear over and over again from a lot of people. And I know that's played a big role in my healing too, is, you have to be willing to recognize that the condition you have, whatever it is, whether it's the Hashimoto's or it's the cancer or some other autoimmune, whatever it is, you can get rid of that label. You don't have to be stuck with that forever. And it can be, definitely a temporary state. There are ways to solve it. You can get past that. You can have that positive mindset. But then, of course, you also have to take action too, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And it
So
was
that
interesting. I was gonna say it
that
was
leads us to
interesting.
this
Oh,
next question
yeah.
here then. Going through difficult times is universal, but why do you think some people suffer more than others?
Yeah, I like to call this the base camp cycle. And we talked about those limitations, and what happens is so often we go to try to make those positive changes with our health, similar to what I did. And you get excited, you kind of, it's like starts in the gut, right? Kind of like you're on the base camp, you're ready to climb the mountain, you get all that excitement, and that excitement lasts about 2 weeks to do the thing that everyone tells you, do the thing, right? Go gluten free or dairy free or clean up your environment. And the excitement lasts about 2 weeks. And then the thing gets hard. And then we rely on willpower, and willpower is going to last you about one more week. I also see this a lot with, diet and exercise, which I hate diet, but we'll just call it that for the sake of ease. But, with women who are trying to, lose weight and eat healthier and get back to the gym and really improve their metabolic health, is really at the core of it, is improving that metabolic health. And looking at it from that place of, I'm going to do the things, but then the things get hard, the obstacles happen, the rainy day, the running late, and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to start on Monday. And then Monday never happens. So instead of climbing the mountain, you're right back at base camp. And this keeps women suffering over and over again, in terms of, we tried the thing to improve our autoimmune disease and it didn't work, or we tried the thing to, eat healthier and it didn't work. And we just get stuck in this cycle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Absolutely. Yeah, I can see that point of getting stuck in that cycle for sure. Absolutely. So that's, relates, I think, a little bit to this next question of what would you say is the most common trap that people need to avoid when creating their comeback story? Basically, a lot of the procrastination, the negative attitude type stuff. What else would you add to that?
Yeah. So I'll give you one example, maybe two examples. So, so we talked about the limitations, and it was interesting because I had a conversation with someone on Instagram this week, and their response back was, "Well, must be nice to be healthy." And I was like, "Ooh," but I was like, "Okay, there were 6 years of suffering, in my victimhood and just suffering with debilitating chronic fatigue and cancer and autoimmune and illness, not realizing there was another side. And then there was an additional 6 years of more suffering, trying to get healthier and not seeing the light of day, and trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing, right? Lots of frustration, lots of overwhelm, because I knew that there was something better out there. I just hadn't cracked the code yet. So, on the other side of that 12 years of suffering, right, was a lot of hope, a lot of faith, a lot of patience, and a lot of discipline. And, I mean, yeah, the other side is pretty nice to wake up and be able to do the things you love doing and have that abundant energy and vibrant health. But I wouldn't change the story. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I wouldn't change it because I got to learn all of the lessons. I got to see everything that doesn't work. I got to realize my own strength and fortitude and grit. And now I get to help others in that process. Like I've been through the trenches. And I think the other thing too, I kind of talked about like the procrastination aspect. And I had, so this is my studio, it's the third bedroom. When I got divorced, we literally just put all the boxes in this room. It was floor to ceiling. It was like an episode of The Hoarders. Like you literally had to move boxes out to step in. And after I had been in this house for about a year, after the divorce, I was like, okay, it's time to clean. And I open the door and I look at all the boxes and I just got so overwhelmed. I went downstairs, I grabbed my rake. It was fall. I was like, I'm going to go outside and rake. Well, I don't have any trees, so I didn't have any leaves. So I look over at my next door neighbor. They had a few leaves. So I spent like, 20 minutes outside raking my neighbor's yard because I didn't want to clean my room. Like we're so conditioned to not want to do the hard things. And I think part of it is just doing the hard things, making a decision. We're so comfortable. We're inside, we live in comfortable environments. I think it was I just recently read Dr. Casey Means book, Good Energy. I think she said like 97% of our day we are inside, right? We are comfortable and we're on our screens and we don't get uncomfortable. And I think it creates this environment where like I was that person, like this is just how it's supposed to be. So if you want to change, you have to do the uncomfortable things.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's definitely worth repeating. Yeah, you have to get uncomfortable enough that you have to realize that, hey, your autoimmune or whatever your health issue are that is that you're dealing with, that has to be a big enough problem that, and you have to recognize that, hey, I can change this and work on it. I'm going to change it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is especially a lot of the women I work with are in midlife and, kind of 40s and 50s. And, we're in a place now where our bodies are like telling us that we need to change. And again, it's going to create a disease state to, force us to make some changes, or it's just going to keep beating us down. But like once we get into perimenopause and menopause, like our bodies are changing and we need to change with it. And we just haven't realized that we need to do that. But it's not just that, it's looking ahead. It's looking at our 60s and 70s and 80s and, hopefully even our 90s. And the decisions that we make today will dictate how we live those years. My dad's at a retirement home and I go there and I look at some of the, elderly people there, and some of them have a really miserable life getting around. And then there's his neighbors. He's got like 180-some-year-old that goes deer hunting every year. And there's an 88-year-old little tiny, I mean, I'm 5 foot tall and she's tall, tinier than I am, little Mennonite lady running around. I mean, she's literally running around circles of all of us with her energy. And I was like, that's what I want. These decisions, it's not about, oh, I want to look cute in my jeans, or, I look cute in a tankini, or, not have to put a sweater on if I'm wearing a dress without sleeves. It's not that. It's not the vanity metric. It's that metabolic, uh, it's the metabolic health. It's that internal metric. It's how we're going to age. And we really need, especially in this age group, we really need to start to redefine what that looks like as we get older.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's like you don't want to be, if you're going to live, hopefully, like you said, to your 80s, 90s, maybe even to 100, you want to be thriving and happy and able to travel and have energy. And, I just think of my grandpa who flew on a sole trip to England to see his favorite art museum at 90 and
Wow.
had all this energy and was doing all kinds of stuff, and actually still even had his driver's license up until about 90, 91 or whatever. And had a stroke a month before his 93rd birthday and died on his birthday, actually. But up until then was healthier than a horse and could do all kinds of stuff. And I think that's the kind of life I want. I don't want the kind of life of being cooped up in a nursing home, like you said,
Right.
lose your mind, lose your physical health, feel like you need to have surgery to replace all your body parts to
Yes,
feel
yes.
healthy. That's not really living. You don't want to live like that. So, yeah. Absolutely. So, I think believe you've started mentioning some of this. So now we know, how to try to avoid this trap. What should people do instead? Give us your 5-step framework that you've
Mm.
created to help people get out of the rut, if you will, and avoid
Uh,
the procrastination and like actually take action.
yeah, this is my Rocky inspired framework. And I named it Rocky after the original Rocky movie, circa 1976. And I just thought it was the greatest comeback movie of all time. So I had my framework. I was like, I want a fun acronym. So R stands for rear view mirror. And that is getting right and making peace with what got you to this place. Because we can't jump in our DeLorean and go back and change time. But what we can do is make peace and forgiveness with all of those situations. It's peace and forgiveness with the other people. And most importantly, it's peace and forgiveness with ourselves. It's one of the hardest things to do. But here's the thing, if you start from that go, 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 you're going to be in that base camp cycle. What this does, it breaks those chains, it breaks those triggers, it breaks those stories, it breaks those patterns, it breaks those limiting beliefs. And it helps you to view all of that from a more neutral perspective. So you're no longer tethered to all of those thoughts that got you here in the first place. And my favorite thing, it's usually about 14 days into my programs, and my students are like, oh my goodness, something happened and I wasn't triggered. This is the first time ever. And I was like, yes, we are on our way. So it's really breaking those chains so you're not as reactive. The cortisol doesn't have that constant spiking. And then so that's R. So O is, I like to say, own your ship with a P, like the boat. And that's personal responsibility. And we talked about that with, my surgeon and her just saying, oh, I don't know, lightning hit. And, this is really that place, for my journey in 2018, realizing, okay, I am ready to make a change. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. Now, all said and done, my journey was 12 years of, I would say suffering, right? And half of that was even after I took responsibility. So this is the long game, but it's also making a commitment to yourself. This isn't about blame or judgment, but it's having those hard conversations with yourself. It's looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, okay, I really do need to make a change. Again, not from a place of blame or shame or judgment, but from this day forward, I have agency over my health. I have agency over my life. So C is create your future self. And this is go time. This is when we start looking at really creating your future self and what that looks like. And especially doing those activities that are going to help us to age with what I call age with agility rather than fragility. And what that means is, okay, things like, do I want to lose 20, 30, 40 pounds because of what the scale says or because of how my genes want to fit? Or do I want to create a lifestyle where I'm eating healthy, nutritious food that fuels my body, that gives me optimal energy, that gives me optimal metabolic health? There's a huge difference. And that's the create your future self is really looking at how do I want to age and what does this look like? Which brings us to K, which is keep the vision, not the view. And I like to say, I can guarantee with 100% guarantee, right? Money back guarantee. I can say 100% of the time, 100% of the people, life is going to happen. The obstacles are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. rainy day, fight with your spouse, running late. I mean, it doesn't even have to be big, right? And when we're in that state of that heightened stress, one little obstacle just throws our total day, out of whack. I was I was speaking at MIT the other week, and we had a 3 hour delay. And I'm just sitting there. I just pulled up a spot and just started working. And it was one of those 3 hour delays where they just kept promising every 20 minutes or so that we were going to
Oh,
get on the flight.
yeah.
They just kind of kept teasing us. And then they were like, well, we don't know. And everyone was losing their minds. Well, you don't understand. I have some place to go. I'm like, everyone here has a place to go. Like, we wouldn't be getting on a plane if there wasn't something important on the other side.
Yeah.
They were losing their minds. They were getting upset, like visibly agitated. They were yelling at the flight attendants. And I'm just like, okay, y'all have lost your minds, right? But this is what happens is that we have so much stress, we're in so much burnout, and we get triggered like that. And we don't understand it's about that really controlling, your nervous system and that regulation. And not, it's like this, the obstacles are always going to happen. It's how we respond. And that's what the keeping the vision, not the view is about, is really getting to that place where your nervous system is regulated so that when the obstacles happen, it doesn't bother you. It's not about, not having the obstacles, it's changing your relationship with stress. And here's the thing is that we can talk about nutrition and movement all day long. But if you continue to let stress hijack your life, it's always going to look like this. So that's a great place to start too. And then that brings us to the why, which is the coming back home to you. And that's, the original hero's journey, realizing, hey, guess what? I had this inside all along, right? You're coming out of your 80s movie montage and you got like all confident and determined and big smile on your face. But this is how life should be every single day. And it's more than just people are like, oh, self care and fill your cup. It's more than that. It's like, and I like to say it's almost like if you remember falling in love and you will move mountains to be with that person. Like your friends are like, hey, do you want to go do something? And you're like, no, I got plans with my number one, person over here. And that's what this is like. It's like we think of, our improvement with our health as so hard, and it doesn't have to be. It's when you can change that so that your identity is waking up and being so excited to do the things, to get healthier, to eat healthier, to move more, to sleep better, to, reduce your stress and all of these things, right? That is when you get to come back home to you. That is when, instead of having everything drain you, everything now gives you energy. And when you have that inside of you, you can then pour that out to others. And that's really what it's all about.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay, well, this has been a lot of really good information. So let's end with one other fast question that I always like to ask everybody. And I have kind of an idea of what you might say because you've kind of sort of shared a little bit of it. But if you could backtrack in your life to when you were at your heyday working at the FBI before you got sick, what is one short piece of wisdom or something that you wish that somebody had told you?
Slow down. Slow down. Yeah.
That's good. I like
Yeah.
that.
Is that what you thought I was going to say?
Not necessarily,
Oh, okay.
but that's good though. That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Holly, let us know. I know you have something free to give people. To tell us what it is verbally, and then of course we'll have it linked in the show notes. And where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you. Thank you again, Anna Laura. Yeah. If you love this Rocky framework, I have a free private podcast training series, and we do a deep dive into the entire framework. So it's a free private podcast training series. And that's at podcastholly.com. So it's a super easy URL to remember, podcastholly.com. And then I love to play and have fun on Instagram, which is just my name, holly.bertone. So come say hello on Instagram and we can hang out there.
Awesome, great. Thanks so much for sharing. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please feel free to share it with your friends, with anybody else you think could benefit. And feel free to rate it, to review it wherever you're listening. We always appreciate those, help spread the word. Thanks again. This has been the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast.